Hello and welcome to another episode of Schlock Tactics, the movie podcast where we believe badder is better and aim to watch the technophobic tat so that you don't have to. My name is Ash and I'm joined once again by Mark. Oh, hi Mark.
Hello.
For new listeners, if you don't know what we do here, we take 2 to 3 bad films, we review them, we talk about them, we compare them to each other and basically decide which is the best bad film out of the bunch. Last episode we did, it was pretty much our biggest episode, biggest shark movies of the summer, which was The Meg and Sharknado 6, The Last Sharknado. So if you missed that one, go back and check it out and still let us know what you thought of those films. But today we are going to be reviewing 2 films from the 90s that really tapped into a growing fear of technology, virtual reality, and of course, the internet. It's The Lawnmower Man from 1992 and Johnny Mnemonic from 1995. So first we'll get into The Lawnmower Man. There is actually a short story by Stephen King called The Lawnmower Man. This film is not based on that short story.
Okay.
They already had a script which was called like Cyber Hell or something rubbish, and then somebody figured out there was a Stephen King story called The Lawnmower Man, so they basically incorporated the slightest elements of it into the film and then called it Stephen King's The Lawnmower Man, and Stephen King sued them twice in a row, which I can imagine him doing. He took the title only for this, so perhaps Stephen King does still get a credit for that, but he definitely didn't want it.
It is. I've got it on IMDb here. Writers, Stephen King, brackets title only.
He didn't want that, though, because why would you?
He's going to start suing IMDb, I think.
Yeah, if you're listening, Stephen King, it's still out there. It's on IMDb. Sort them out. So the special effects and the CGI in this film, obviously very early on in the life of CGI, was done by a company called Angel Studios, and they would go on to become Rockstar Games.
Really?
AKA the biggest video games developer in the world.
Wow.
So I think you would maybe have to say they were the most successful people that worked on this film overall.
That is some cracking trivia.
Yeah. So, I mean, we obviously will discuss the special effects in the film, which weren't great, but it was 1992, and really this was only maybe the 5th or 6th film to have even tried this level of CGI, so we have to cut him a break there. So The Lawnmower Man, if you want to know what it's about, I'm going to read you the opening crawl. Basically, both of these films have opening crawls where they give you the plot in a nice succinct block of text. By the turn of the millennium, a technology known as virtual reality will be in widespread use. It will allow you to enter computer-generated artificial worlds as unlimited as the imagination itself. Its creators foresee millions of positive uses, while others fear it as a new form of mind control. So that's it. That's your opening crawl to give you an idea of what the concept of this film is. It's obviously based all around virtual reality, and it's actually a little virtual reality warning that you get at the beginning. Me and Mark, we watched the director's cut of The Lawnmower Man, which is 2 hours and 20 minutes. I'm so sorry, Mark. Not many bad films get a director's cut, so that was interesting. But we chose to watch it so that you don't have to. Please don't. We open up with The Lawnmower Man in a place called Virtual Space Industries. Basically looks like a level out of Perfect Dark.
Yeah.
And similar graphics as well when we get to that. Straight away we see the star of our film, the one and only Pierce Brosnan. Bronhom, as I like to call him. For those of you who don't know, Pierce Brosnan, he had 2 involvements with the Razzies. Neither of them were for this film, shockingly, and neither of them were for Die Another Day, somehow. He was nominated for The World Is Not Enough, but he would finally win a Razzie for his part in Mamma Mia, the musical based on the works of ABBA, which you may imagine I have not seen. So there you go. A Razzie Award winner, Pierce Brosnan, no surprise there. He is your leading man in this film. Pre-Bond, emerging star here, and that's he plays Dr. Angelo, who is a virtual reality sort of scientist that works for this virtual space industries, or VSI as they will abbreviate it throughout the film. Yeah, it gets pretty mad straight away. We're introduced to one of his test subjects, Roscoe, the test chimp. The VR test chimp, who Pierce Brosnan describes as the best chimp I've ever had. They're wanting to pump him full of drugs and really crank him up to maximise the test results, and he doesn't want to do that. But they do anyway. They plug him into this sort of gyroscope that you have to go into when you start to do your VR for some reason. And we get our very first snippet of CGI here, and what I think it's what these people think video games are.
Yeah.
But really not. Like, both of these films are made by people who have an idea of technology and computer, but I don't know if they've ever used one.
Why do you have to get into a gyroscope and be flipped around in order to experience VR? I don't get it.
We've never done it, so we don't know. It sounds dangerous. But we get a glimpse into the program here that the chimp has been plugged into, which is like a basic first-person shooter. It's got like a sort of Mega Man arm, and he's like going up to a pyramid and shooting things. Didn't look like a great video game, to be honest. This was the cutting edge of the VR, military VR at the time. It all becomes a bit much, and the robo-chimp, he actually does look like RoboCop. Yeah. He has a helmet with a little visor going across his eyes, and he is RoboCop in chimp form. He goes on a typical rampage because he's been pumped full of drugs and plugged into the mainframe, man, too much, and he goes mad. I was reminded many times in this film of one of my favourite films, Rise of the Planet of the Apes, and that was certainly the case with this chimp, going mad off of experimental drugs and ruining the whole project that they were trying to get funding for there.
I haven't even seen Planet of the Apes, and it reminded me of that.
I mean, yeah, it's a chimp becoming slightly more intelligent. That was the idea.
Yeah.
And I think it's worth noting for anyone who's not old enough to remember, the early 90s there was a real moral panic about video games and violent video games in particular, and there are like some great documentaries out there that cover this. Mortal Kombat had just come out, and parents were freaking out. Doom had come out, and just parents and teachers and adults, squares, were freaking out that their children were going to be playing these games and would turn them into violent monsters, which this film is tapping into quite a bit, certainly with the chimp character. But he does go on a rampage, and he escapes the VSI industry compound. We are then introduced to the Lawnmower Man himself, Job Smith. Now, Job is played by Jeff Fahey. Many, many people, I hope, will recognise him from Lost as helicopter pilot Frank Lapidus. So I've got my Lost reference out really early here. This is someone that was in Lost and was quite a big character. So in order to make him appear as a man-child and a simpleton, they put him in a dungarees with only one strap on, sort of messy, bleached blonde hair. He encounters the chimp, the robo-chimp with the helmet on, and straight away he goes, "Hey, Cybo Man, it's Cybo Man." And I'm thinking, does he mean Cyberman? I don't know what he's saying. And we eventually realise that he's a big comic book fan, and one of his comic book heroes is this sort of robot character called Cybo Man. Even more, you get the sense that he's a simpleton, and he's not very clever.
Bit isolated, bit of a geek.
He's what Pierce Brosnan will refer to several times as a retard. Not my words, but he sort of lives in a shed out the back of a church. The VSI Industries, they cannot have this intelligent, violent chimp on the rampage, so they send out a SWAT team. Quite an overpowered SWAT team. They storm this little shed outside the church with Job carrying the chimp, and they basically have about 20 grown men with assault rifles versus a chimp with like a revolver. This is quite disproportionate.
Kind of overkill.
Obviously, Pierce Brosnan is there to try and talk him down. He knows Job. Job cuts his lawn, so he knows him well. Tries to talk him down, but it doesn't work, and the chimp sort of gets triggered. He sees something that triggers him, and he starts having a freak out. Climbs up on the shed, and about 20 guys just go just gun him down in front of Job, and Job is like having a meltdown at this. He can't believe that Cybo Man is been killed. We also obviously get a priest character because there is a church involved here, and he quite regularly whips Job with a belt.
Yeah,
it's a sort of Catholic kind of cliche here of this kind of creepy priest who beats people.
He wants to make sure that Job doesn't spread the news about a chimp being murdered.
Well, yes, of course. VSI meet with the priest and say, we'll make a sizable donation to the church if you keep this hush hush.
Yeah.
We mentioned earlier, obviously, this extended director's cut is half an hour longer than the theatrical cut. It was around this time I started to realise exactly what this half hour consisted of. This was 50% Pierce Brosnan bare-chested with a cigarette recording a monologue and 50% Job mowing somebody's lawn. But mostly it was bare-chested Pierce Brosnan smoking and giving a monologue. This came up again and again and again. Never seen without a cigarette in his hand, and his shirt just open for some reason. He's getting stressed. He needs a fag and a whiskey and to record his monologue.
And I couldn't take him seriously because he had a ring in his ear, and I was used to watching GoldenEye, and I saw him come in looking a few years younger, and he had like a gold ring in his ear, which made him look like sort of like a 21-year-old.
But he did have glasses.
Yeah.
So to indicate he was a scientist. But he was quite a rugged scientist.
Yeah.
Quite a ruggedly handsome scientist.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can imagine he got more ladies than your average virtual reality expert. He's really had enough of working for the government. He says, quote, "I've been sucking on the military tit for too long." Some of the government officials have a bit of a Skype with the director, I guess the villain of the film, but he's not seen very often. But he's out there. He's the sort of the director. Something quite X-Files about that. Pierce Brosnan is recommended that Pierce Brosnan takes a leave of absence, have a break and recover from the terrible chimp rampage. So he spends most of his days getting drunk, sort of hanging out on his lawn and watching Job mow his lawn, and also plugging into the VR system that he has in his basement. So this is like a suspended kind of chair, suspended hammock. The best parts of these films are always the bits where we go inside the virtual reality and we get this extremely primitive CGI, which you have to see it to believe it. We can't really explain it.
I don't think people would even be able to recreate this now, like modern CGI people.
There's a Facebook page called Cool 3D World, and that kind of specialises in recreating quite weird CGI from the 90s that you would have got. But it's also quite well done. It's much well done than this, but it's the spirit of early CGI in that it was a bit weird and clunky, and it was very arbitrary. Nothing really fit together. It was just, look what we can make with CGI. And they're often quite druggy, and there's lots of molecules and bright colours, so this is a bit of that. And his wife's obviously not happy with this. She comes down and says, "You were meant to take me to the city this weekend."
She says, "Falling, floating, flying, so what's next? Fucking?"
But yeah, this sort of signifies that Pierce Brosnan, he's on a slippery slope. Once he plugs in, he can't unplug. And she does unplug him. And he goes, "You never unplug somebody while they're in the mainframe," or whatever. Pierce Brosnan starts to theorise about what exactly was the bond between this retarded man and the chimp. Quite insultingly, he's comparing Job's intelligence to that of a chimp. Maybe I could continue my project using him instead of a chimp. Obviously keep it off the books, the VSI people. He doesn't want them to get their hands on it. He obviously is able to coerce Job into taking part in these experiments. Hey, do you want to play a video game? Oh, sure I do, yeah. He gets Job to come down and play this sort of virtual reality game where they're sort of flying through tunnels, like a tunnel racing. It's a bit like Wipeout, F-Zero. All the while here, a local neighbourhood kid, Pete, is his friend, is participating in this as well. I don't know if you recognise the actor that played Pete here. 1 year after this film, he would go on to star as Arnold Schwarzenegger's sidekick in Last Action Hero. Yeah, it's a little annoying kid that everybody hates. Also the only actor in this film that would return for the sequel, Lawnmower Man 2, Beyond Cyberspace.
Didn't even know there was a sequel.
Yes, we're not watching it. But he's involved as well, so there you go. We get a sort of a funny VR training montage while Job is being trained up to be a super intelligent guy. Obviously it's quite hard to portray that in a sort of a traditional exercise montage. So what they do instead is have Pierce Brosnan do lots of exercise whilst recording his notes. So he's like running on a treadmill. Yes, intelligence has increased 10 IQ points. So you still get the feel of a training montage, even though this guy is just playing video games, which is not something that lends itself to a cinematic montage. But even though all he's doing is playing video games, the very next scene you see Job in his little shed with his shirt off, and he is ripped.
Yeah,
he's fucking jacked. So maybe it's just all the lawn mowing, but like you're like, Jesus. And he starts to tell the priest, look, I'm starting to want more from life, like cowboy boots. That scientist has put the devil in you. He's corrupted you to Satan. And I believe this was actually a theme of the short story by Stephen King. There was a satanic element to it, so maybe that's been pulled out of that story. But yeah, mainly what Job wants is cowboy boots. And the priest goes to hit him again with the belt, and he grabs his hand, and he stands up to him. Job's got more confidence, got more intelligence. This experimental stuff is working with Dr. Angela, with Brosnan. And then we do get the what I call the Wild West makeover of Job at a gas station. He's bending over to pick up the petrol pump, and the woman's looking out of their car like, ooh, who's that? And then you get a real like slow crawl from the cowboy boots up the flared jeans, up the light blue cowboy shirt, and then the coiffured bleach blonde do at the top. And she says, do I know you? She's like, yeah, I'm the Lawnmower Man. You're not the Lawnmower Man. I am. So now we get a love interest for Job because he's cool now. He's had a makeover and he's cool and he's intelligent. So this is one of his neighbours who wants a bit of that. Job is then invited by the sexy neighbour up for lemonade. He's mowing the lawn with his shirt off because he's ripped now. Still wearing the jeans and the cowboy boots, but he's lost the shirt and he's mowing the lawn. And this woman is on her balcony in a dressing gown with the tray of lemonade. You must be hot out there. Do you want to come up for some lemonade? It goes real porno real quick here.
Yeah.
We get, I would say this is probably the most awkward sex scene we've talked about since Basket Case.
I don't think it tops Basket Case.
It doesn't, but it was awkward.
Yeah.
And I was glad I wasn't watching it with anyone. Because he's clearly a virgin and he's never sort of done anything with a woman. She has to basically give him a tutorial of how to do it.
How to kiss.
Yeah, so he kisses her. Okay, that's good, but put your tongue in my mouth as well. Oh!
And then he's just standing there with his tongue out, and she just starts sucking it.
It's horrible. This is horrible. And then my favourite bit is when she takes his hand, puts it on her tit, and says, "That's soft."
Oh yeah.
And then puts it on his dick. That's hard. Fucking hell. This was stupid. This is horrendous softcore cable porn. I hated this. We're back in the facility again, and what he does, Brosnan basically sits him in a chair with speakers all around him and some computer screens, and they basically have a marathon like Encarta session where he plays him CD-ROM encyclopedia discs until he bursts. Basically, Pierce Brosnan says that he's absorbed 100 hours of knowledge in 2 minutes. In fact, Job is really becoming too clever, because out in public he starts to have kind of seizures where the whole room is shaking and it sort of looks like it's going to go a bit CGI, and then it doesn't, and he's sort of having these aneurysms. He's too clever, he's taken on too much information. But what Pierce Brosnan is able to do is to tell the government people about what's happened with this guy, and finally sort of tell them about his experiments he's been doing on the sly. And they're like, well, this sounds great. Let's tell a VSI director about this, and we can get full funding. He says, you can get both tits now, which was a real subtle callback to the government tit line from earlier in the film, which I quite appreciated. Yeah, it's just going 100 miles an hour now. Job is freaking out. He becomes telepathic, so he can read Brosnan's mind, but also telekinetic, so he can move things with his mind.
Yeah.
he can squeeze all of the toothpaste out of a toothpaste tube.
What
for example.
Incredible power. The best thing to show first.
Well, it can be a pain in the arse to get the toothpaste out sometimes, especially when you get to the end. So I think this is quite a good skill.
I think it was worth it.
He takes his sexy neighbour into the VR facility. Whenever you go into the VR system, you have to wear these kind of Tron-like jumpsuits to signify futurism, even though Tron did this 10 years earlier.
Yeah.
And the effects in Tron are way better than this.
Yeah.
So just think of that. Imagine that. We hinted at it earlier in the film. What are you going to do next in VR? Fuck. That's exactly what they're going to do. So they both plug in. They start like making out as these sort of humanoid chrome metal looking figures. Their lips sort of like fuse together. They get so aroused that they fuse together into the form of a dragonfly and start flying through the virtual reality world, which signifies orgasm, maybe? So at this point he's able to mow lawns with his mind, and this is where we get little elements from the short story coming in a little bit more. He argues with Pierce Brosnan that, we've always had these skills of telekinesis. And so, yeah, as I say, the extended cut here, really the extensions are lawn mowing and shirtless monologues, and we get more of those again in tandem. Pierce Brosnan is called away to a business meeting with the director. He has to pitch his findings about Job to him. The whole time the director is on the phone to someone else on his massive mobile phone, which is weird. Brosnan states, I can cure retardation. And then he sort of burst into a massive rant about chimps and formulas and batches, and I felt he went quite Nick Cage at this point. This is fucking ridiculous! These chimps, you killed my chimps! They were the best chimps I had! I can't believe you didn't tell me about this!
Yeah, he lost it.
Yeah, freaking out. He had... this was really his maybe you shouldn't be living here moment, which for anyone that's not aware of one of the most famous Pierce Brosnan memes, it's from a film called Taffin, where he freaks out. Have you ever heard this, Mark?
No.
I'll play it for you right now.
Okay.
We probably will never review Taffin because it's too bad, but the best bit of Taffin...
What goes on in this town is none of your business.
As long as I'm living here, it is.
Then maybe you shouldn't be living here!
Easily fixed.
Yeah, that's the best bit of Taffin, and that's really what Pierce Brosnan was tapping into. It came much earlier than this film. But yeah. You killed my chimps! Every now and then, Pierce Brosnan is mostly soft-spoken, so it's even more alarming when he starts screaming at the top of his lungs, and that's what he did.
It's like, if you've seen like Bond films, you think it's like, it's cool, suave Bond, and then seeing that is quite a...
he never freaks out as James Bond.
No.
He never goes, fucking hell, Q! This fucking pen! It doesn't happen. It's just a surprise he got the job, really, but we will get to those one day. So yeah, Dr. Angelo here manages to escape the government, VSI people. Job really goes mad. He goes on a mad rampage here. He confronts the priest. All the while he's wearing his VR suit, so he's having trouble separating reality, I guess, from virtual. Confronts his priest. He's sort of possessed by VR. He's talking in a weird voice at this point. The priest is shouting at him, you've got the devil in you, you've been possessed. He's been possessed by, like, devilish computer technology. Who the fuck is writing this film that thinks that computers are the devil? But yeah, he uses his, pyrokinesis here. He sets the priest on fire. Terrible, terrible CGI. When the priest catches fire. Now, I think... I'll give them a benefit of the doubt. Maybe they were just trying to make this look like the virtual reality graphics. And if they wanted to, they could have made it look like good fire.
It didn't even barely look like fire.
But I don't know
it just looked like he was disintegrating very orangely.
It looked like a sort of Windows Media Player visualization when you used to play your music on there. That's what it kind of looked like. He confronts the local bully that's been hassling him the whole film, and he kind of uses his telekinesis to kind of like wrap him up with gas pumps. And I think this was the weirdest part of the film. It took me quite a while to realise what the hell this was meant to be. It was just a disembodied CGI head with lawnmower rotary blades whirring around in the mouth.
That's very weird.
Eating another person's brain. This was like a bad acid trip. Pierce Brosnan returns home and he's shocked to see his wife in the kitchen with a pinny on. This is not normal. What's wrong with you? And she's like, I've been baking all day. Oh God, she's been brainwashed.
Yeah, she's doing nice things. What's going on?
She's baking for me. She's been brainwashed. Which just tells you a lot about their relationship.
Yeah.
She's been brainwashed into being a cliched housewife. What the hell? Job gives a little quite a cool little monologue here. I think he says, by 2001, everyone will be hooked into VR and hooked into me. Spoiler, everybody was not hooked into VR by 2001. It had largely gone away and has only recently come up again as a sort of a viable technology. They end up back at VSI. Someone's hacking the mainframe. One of the minor characters.
Of course they are.
Yeah. Some virtual bees descend upon the guards at the VSI facility.
Oh, yeah.
Not the bees. Yes, the virtual bees. And of course, Job sort of becomes one with the VR. He fuses with it. He leaves behind his sort of wetsuit and a kind of a sort of desiccated head popping out of the top of it, in which to indicate all of his life essence has now gone into the computer. And he sort of takes on this character within the computer. This was a very passing resemblance of Jeff Fahey superimposed onto a sort of a humanoid polygon CGI character with like a crazed look in his eyes. It didn't really look like the actor at all. All these different cylinders are being thrust into his face that say access denied and IO port and
It's like a beehive of like these little things, and he has to find the right one. And he's like, "Access denied."
This is the mainframe represented in CGI, and he just touches these sort of cylinders. Access denied. Access denied. Yeah. He's getting really annoyed. So Pierce Brosnan also goes into the VR system so that he can confront him. So now we have two sort of humanoid CGI people that look absolutely nothing like the actors that they're meant to be. And he finally finds one cylinder which says access granted. But for some reason there's a self-destruct in the mainframe and the VSI Industries explodes. The virtual reality system explodes. That's it.
Angela and Peter escape.
Along with the hot neighbour.
Yeah.
Who he instantly shacks up with. So he's over his wife really quickly.
And then there's a final shot of like skyscrapers and a load of telephones ringing.
Yeah, this is a throwback to Job's monologue that says everyone will be hooked into him, and one day you'll wake up to the sound of every phone ringing, which is quite cool actually.
Yeah.
Shame it was the last shot of the film.
And then it does happen, but then that's it.
Yeah. But it suggests that he's sort of escaped and he's now infiltrated telephones. We get one last monologue from Pierce Brosnan, but he's wearing a shirt to suggest that he's pulled himself together, he's stopped drinking, he's got a new girlfriend about 2 hours after his wife died, and he's got this little reconstituted family. And then we get the credits and we get some extremely blatant Terminator music. That is The Lawnmower Man from 1992. What were your overall thoughts on this one, Mark?
I quite enjoyed it in an ironic way. There was some pacing issues with this film. There was be sort of like I'd be getting into it, and then like some of the scenes would just drag on too long. Probably won't watch it yet, but it'd be interesting to watch the theatrical cut and just see how it compares.
You.
Yeah, sit through it again, but without.
I mean, it was only half an hour longer.
I quite liked watching Job turn from stupid, innocent character to this kind of insanely intelligent, losing his mind,
like megalomaniac.
Yeah.
I think he probably had the best performance in the film. Everyone else was overacting constantly, so that's sort of tough to judge.
Yeah.
But like you say, he gave a convincing portrayal of a guy who was an idiot and then gradually became really clever and What did you think of the special effects and the CGI? Bearing in mind it is 1992, do you think it's still quite bad for then? Or?
It's pretty bad. I mean, it's not Terminator 2, which came out around the same time.
And was great.
Still looks good today.
And Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
And The Abyss.
Yeah.
It just goes to show, when a new technology comes around for films, don't be too quick to jump on it, because people are still doing terrible CGI. It's something that can be great and something that can be bad depending on who's doing it and how much money is being put into it. It's kind of an ambitious film in lots of things it's trying to say, but doesn't necessarily get its point across in any of those ways. It's not dated very well at all, because they were perhaps a bit quick to make a kind of a horror film about a technology that was new and scary, and now it looks ridiculous because it's 2018 and people are really into VR. It's like a real thing that's taken off now. So yeah, I think it's a rambling, incoherent, quite dense sci-fi film, but it's also quite dull in parts. We didn't need an extra half an hour here. I can confirm that. And I'm still trying to make sense of it all, really. Good 20 odd years later since I first saw it, and I'm not quite sure what they were going for here. Okay, so the next film that we're going to talk about is Johnny Mnemonic from 1995. This does star Keanu Reeves, who was one of the biggest movie stars on the planet at the time. It's really quite a record breaker when it comes to awards. Mark, how many Razzie nominations do you think Keanu Reeves has achieved over the course of his career?
5.
He has been nominated 7 times.
Whoa.
For 7 different films. He was nominated for a Razzie for this film in 1995, but he lost to Pauly Shore for what I think it was Stepson or something like that. Keanu Reeves, notorious terrible actor, wooden actor.
That's the first thing I've written here, is terrible acting.
That's what springs to mind when you think of Keanu Reeves. But he was repeatedly cast in big movies like this.
Yeah,
and has been in some of the biggest kind of blockbusters over the last 25 years. So, for all his faults, he was a moneymaker. And he was put in this film. He was the title character here in Johnny Mnemonic, which was also a film about technology and the dangers of technology. But it was less virtual reality in this, and more sort of the internet and computers. That the film actually opens with Internet 2021. I wasn't quite sure what was going to happen in 2021. But the internet is going to happen in something will happen with the internet in 2021. But we had another crawl to open this film, which was I think even better than The Lawnmower Man. New century, age of terminal capitalism. The armoured towers of multinational corporations rise above the ruins of the democracies that gave them birth. Soldiers of the Yakuza defend them. Hackers, data pirates, low-tech media rebels are the enemy, burrowing like rats in the walls of cyberspace. A new plague convulses the cities. Nerve attenuation syndrome, incurable, fatal, epidemic, bringing fear and misery, as old as the species itself. But the most precious data is something entrusted to elite private agents, wet-wired to function as human data banks. Mnemonic couriers.
Sounds promising.
That's a lot of information. Yeah. That's a lot of exposition.
And how much of that is touched on in the film?
As I read it now, I'm recognising some some of it, but certainly not a lot of it.
It's the Yakuza and the courier.
And low tech.
Yeah.
It certainly sets the scene for a much better film than this is.
Yeah.
Don't get excited by that crawl. You're not going to get a lot of that stuff. It's more of a concept. This is actually based on a short story of the same name by a guy called William Gibson, who also did this screenplay. So both of these films allegedly based on short stories, but have hardly any similarities. We should mention this film confuses both the geography and culture of China and Japan. They're quite interchangeable for this film, so if we accidentally say something's Japanese and it is Chinese, that's only because the film made us think that, okay?
Yeah.
Just want to lay that out there. For this film, Chinese and Japanese is the same. Not for us. There's a lot of talk about this nerve attenuation syndrome, is this sort of new plague that's come from technology and the internet and having too much information. We see our hero, Keanu Reeves, Johnny Mnemonic, in bed with a lady. We know it's futuristic because he has no sideburns. I want to mention, actually, before we run down the film, the cast in this film is really weird. Keanu Reeves, Dolph Lundgren, Udo Kier, Henry Rollins, Ice-T, and of course Takeshi Kitano as well. What a weird bunch of people to all be together. We have some musicians, we have some quite wooden action stars, we have some cult actors in the case of Udo Kier and Takeshi Kitano. It's such a weird thrown together thing. But Udo Kier is introduced here as Ralphie, who is kind of the boss, who gives Johnny Mnemonic his jobs. He is one of the data carriers mentioned in the opening crawl here, and he wants to do one more job as a data carrier. And we get a little flash, our first flash of Ice-T's character giving a little propaganda message. Keanu Reeves goes up to this hotel room, and there's basically a bunch of kind of Chinese nerds there who give him the details of this one last big job that he's got to do. He says to them, "I've got a question. You don't look like the sort of people I work for." It's not a question.
Yeah.
It's a statement. I didn't understand.
How do you answer that?
What was the question? I thought you had a question. There's a lot of techno babble here. Mainly they talk about the risks of carrying too much data inside your head can cause synaptic seepage.
Yeah, just nonsense, basically.
Yeah, gibberish. Hilariously, they talk about they need to fax something first. So the year is 2021. We've discovered how to store data inside our heads, but you still need to send a fax first. So the idea is to upload all of this data into his head, but he quickly realises there's way too much data. You can't put that much data inside my head, you fool. So he has to go into the bathroom to excuse himself. This leads to him doing Tai Chi in front of the mirror, preceding the film Man of Tai Chi that he would do. A bunch of Yakuza mobsters crash this hotel room, all wearing sort of satin trench coats. Which not the typical PVC trench coats you usually see in Cyberpunk, but a lovely sort of satin dressing gown. There's a little bit of action here, some gunfire, people being killed, and a bit of hand-to-hand combat. One of the nerds loses the tops of his fingers, get chopped off.
Yeah.
By this one Yakuza guy who's a recurring henchman in this film. He basically has like a cybernetic thumbnail that he can use to summon a sort of laser whip. He uses it to slice off this guy's fingers in a sort of finger sushi. But Keanu Reeves is able to get out of there. Where's he going to head next? He's been in Beijing, he's been around Tokyo. He's going to go to Newark.
Not New York.
That's Newark, New Jersey.
Yeah.
He's going to head to.
It's a weird place to set it.
Yeah.
Out of all the big US cities.
They maybe had a deal in place to shoot in that part of the world. It does happen sometimes. There's mention of more seepage, the synaptic seepage, because his brain's like overloaded with this data. He doesn't know what the data is. He just knows that he has to get out of his head or he will die.
Yeah.
We're introduced to the great Takeshi Kitano. And I love this introduction because everyone knows him as this psychotic kind of Japanese sort of samurai or crooked cop, and here's a slow sort of pull out where he's sitting amongst a mountain of cuddly toys on his daughter's bed. It was his first big American film that he did. He'd made his name in Japan and directed lots of cult, super violent films, but this was his debut in America. He has a bit of a meeting with the, I will refer to him as the thumbnail henchman. Plan is to cut off Keanu Reeves' head and preserve it cryogenically and then bring it back to the Yakuza so that they can get the information out of it, which is, There's lots of kind of Blade Runner vibes here in these scenes. Certainly the scenes in Japan. It's all neon kind of sci-fi, which I quite enjoyed. Reminded me quite a lot of the recent Ghost in the Shell live action film, also starring Takeshi Kitano, which I think is good, and the internet can fight me if they disagree. We are then introduced to one of those Sterling cast members I mentioned earlier, Henry Rollins.
Yeah.
He plays here a doctor, sort of a nerd with his massive glasses on. He'd done a few films before this, and he's done plenty afterwards as well. He's actually got quite an interesting filmography if you check him out on IMDb. But of course, he's known as being a punk rock icon from the Black Flag days. But he's going to be a bit of a nerd in this film. And he's working together with Ice-T's character, who is also sort of introduced at the same time, who's called J-Bone. And he's kind of a cyber anarchist. You know how I know he's an anarchist? He's got an anarchist symbol tattooed on his forehead. So let there be no doubt. The different factions are being introduced, and this is something I like about this film, is that you get an idea there's going to be like a real showdown here between the Yakuza against the anarchists, who I guess some people would think they were bad. It's kind of ambiguous, really. It gets quite confusing. I struggled to follow who was on whose side here. Johnny goes to confront Ralphie, and it seems like Ralphie has sold him out to the Yakuza, because Thumbnail Guy is there and he tries to take his head off with the laser and put it in the cryogenic bucket. We're introduced to the female lead in this film, a character called Jane. She's played by Dina Meyer, who many of our listeners would probably know from Starship Troopers. Not the Denise Richards character, but she's the kind of badass on the ground shooting bugs character, while Denise Richards is fannying about. Because she helps Johnny to escape the Yakuzas, but only on the condition of money. I think it's 50 grand, isn't it?
Yeah.
He agrees to pay her, so she's going to stick around until then. Ralphie meets his end here by the laser thumbnail guy, who whips his laser at him and kind of like carves him up like a turkey. Just slices of him fall off the side. And Keanu Reeves, he explains to Jane how I'm starting to lose it, man. I've got 8 gig of data in my head. It was this inconceivably large amount of data that people couldn't even imagine. 8 gig. Like, you can't even put that on a computer. Like, that's so much information. We get Takeshi Kitano killing people with a samurai sword, which is, of course, what you want. We get this ridiculous scene where they're able to find this sort of den where Keanu Reeves can, again, tap into the mainframe, and he puts on this sort of visor which makes him again look a bit like RoboCop. He puts on these like power gloves, Nintendo power gloves. He's doing pretty much what Job and Pierce Brosnan were doing in The Lawnmower Man, in that he's sort of exploring a computer system. He's exploring the internet. He'll reach into like a circuit board and pull out a bit of information, like literally.
Yeah.
Or he'll literally unwrap a blueprint, but in virtual reality, not in real life. So he's trying to find out what the data is inside his head. I think they do say he's on the net.
I think this is where you get loads of crap 90s VR CGI as well.
Yeah. We're 3 years on here from Lawnmower Man, and I don't think the CGI is really better.
No.
And they use it less, to be fair to them.
But it hasn't picked up.
Not really, no. A little bit closer to N64, but not quite. We can't quite yet do 3D very well here. He sort of runs into a hacker while he's exploring this virtual reality world, who tells him, "Get off my network, man, you're too hot. You're going to lead them right to me." And the alarms are going off, and he's like... And he eventually realises that the data inside his head is owned by Pharmacom, who are, as you can imagine, an evil pharmaceutical company. So it's at this point that we are randomly introduced to Dolph Lundgren. So in the last episode, I was very disappointed that we didn't get him in Sharknado 6. So I've immediately been compensated by Dolph Lundgren here. Now, he is Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Techno Jesus. And I know because he mentioned the word Jesus in pretty much every line of dialogue. Yeah. It's Jesus time. Come to Jesus. Jesus is here. Yes, I get it. You have long hair and a beard, and you carry like a shepherd's crook around with you. Yeah. But you are techno version. An interesting character. I would have liked it more if he didn't keep banging us over the head with the fact that he's meant to be Jesus. If it had been more of a subtle metaphor, I maybe would have liked it more. But he's not the usual character that Dolph Lundgren would play. He's not... Jane, she starts freaking out as well because she's actually got too many implants in her arm as well, and she's suffering from the much talked about NAS, the nerve attenuation syndrome. So she actually suffers from this herself. You were able to see exactly what this is. It's basically just shaking and freaking out, and this has caused Keanu Reeves to kind of freak out, and he just kind of like screams at her, "Are you strung out?" And yeah, she is. She's strung out on technology. We go back to Henry Rollins here as the Doctor. I think that Henry Rollins probably landed this part off the back of his music video that he did the year prior to this with the Rollins band, which was called Disconnect. it was a typical spoken word over hardcore, which is what the Rollins band did, but it was this whole commentary on how like everybody's plugged into technology nowadays and people need to disconnect themselves or they won't be able to think for themselves. Super ahead of its time in 1994, like a premonition of things to come. And I think he was really referencing that kind of song and obviously what he felt about technology himself, that it was causing people to become isolated and distant. I enjoyed this. I thought Henry Rollins was one of the better actors in this film. Much more grounded than a lot of people in this film. He didn't really get any cheesy dialogue at all. Like, his dialogue was quite good, or he certainly played it good.
He acted a lot better than Keanu Reeves did.
Yeah, acting opposite Keanu Reeves is an open goal, for sure. But he takes them to their sort of heaven compound, or they discover that inside Keanu Reeves' head, the pharmacom data, he looks at it, and it's actually the cure for NAS, for nerve attenuation syndrome. So this evil pharmaceutical company, and this is a common conspiracy theory out there, this pharmaceutical company have the cure for this horrible disease. They just haven't told anyone because you can profit much more off a treatment than you can off a cure.
Yeah.
Quite a poignant point to be making, I
nice
think,
a bit
actually.
of satire, like almost tapping into kind of Starship Troopers kind of RoboCop type.
Like Verhoeven, political satire. And it's something that people still talk about nowadays, you know, what if pharmaceutical companies had a cure for cancer and they're just not telling anyone?
Yeah.
Because that wouldn't make them any money. It's always a controversial theory, but it's always something that's worth considering. And this film is probably as lofty as this film got, really. It all kind of kicks off then in this area. Dolph Lundgren's Techno Jesus pops up again. I think he's loosely been recruited by Takeshi Kitano's character. Well, it's not really clear. He crucifies Henry Rollins on the hospital bed. Again, subtle. So now it's Keanu Reeves' turn to get his outrageous Nick Cage rant. Just under the Newark, New Jersey bridge. Initially, he says under his breath, "Oh, what the fuck is going on?" And then he raises his head to the sky and says, "What the fuck is going on?" There's all this stuff about the stuff that he misses from the hotels. "I want my shirts laundered.
I want room service."
Yeah, the big line is "I want room service," and then he goes on to talk about "I want my shirts laundered." Yeah, this is the most animation and emotion that you see from Keanu Reeves in the whole film. But he is right underneath what they call heaven. The bridge that's the hideout for all the anarchists, taken into it by Ice-T, by J Bone, his character. You know, Ice-T is a pretty ridiculous name for an actor, but J Bone, I would rather say Ice-T. A return to the show for Ice-T, by the way. Leprechaun in a Hood, we did it a couple of episodes ago, so he is maybe one of the first people to return to Schlock Tactics. Certainly quite so soon, I didn't plan it. Now this heaven place is a sort of a techno utopia, and the way they symbolise this is by having lots of TVs hanging from the ceiling, which, again, get on that fax machine, that cutting-edge 2021 technology. This is the thing I mainly remember about the film, and I'm sure many people also. For about half of the film, they've been building up this guy called Jones. He's the head of the anarchists. He's like a techno-genius hacker. He's going to help you get the data out of his head. And we're introduced to Jones, and it's a dolphin. It's a dolphin in a tank with a VR hat on. I think this is really what pushes this film over the edge of what they can get away with and what they can't get away with.
Sort of a metal eye thing.
It's so ludicrous, and it's the one film I think it's the thing many people remember from this film. And Keanu Reeves sort of exaggerates this as well. It's a fucking fish. About this time, the Yakuza starts storming the headquarters here. They talk about that they need to triangulate the infrasound of the dolphin onto Keanu Reeves' head, and that way they can decode the data and get this data, the cure for NAS, out of his head, which is really what they're trying to do.
Gibberish.
The laser ninja guy comes back. Ice-T just keeps repeating, "You have to hack your own brain." Takeshi Kitano turns up in Newark. All the way from Tokyo to Newark to personally confront Johnny.
Why Newark?
The infrasound from the dolphin gets the download. It's definitely as messy as the Lawnmower Man's closing moments.
Yeah.
And quite similar. Do not attempt interface, the computer tells him. He does interface successfully. He uploads the pharmacom files, so that means that everybody now knows what the cure to NAS is. They look out across the skyline, and for some reason the Pharmacom skyscraper is on fire. So this interfacing really was quite strong stuff. A funny little gag at the end here is Dolph Lundgren's lifeless, charred corpse is on the floor, and the arm starts moving to tease that he will rise. He will be resurrected. But it's just them winching up the corpse.
Yeah, and then dropping it into the water.
Dropping it into the river from a great height.
Yeah.
Comedically. What were your overall thoughts of Johnny Mnemonic?
Quite entertaining in some ways, probably the wrong ways. It was a bit faster paced than Lawnmower Man.
More action film.
Because it was a bit shorter. Yeah. There was more action. Don't know if I gelled with any of the characters much.
There's a lot of characters.
Yeah.
And a lot of known actors as well.
I did like the cast. I quite like Lundgren as like this kind of Jesus madman. I think I like the cast more than the characters.
Yeah, I agree.
There's a lot of potential for them.
Yeah.
Although Henry Rollins' character was pretty cool.
Yeah.
He was probably one of the best ones. Far too much stupid jargon and terrible VR and concepts that you just can't take seriously. I'm not sure if people took them seriously at the time even, but they certainly don't nowadays. And
I didn't see it when it came out. Obviously, I remember people being afraid of Mortal Kombat, as I said, parents, and I remember people being afraid of Y2K and the internet being a scary thing to the older generation. So both these films, they're doing things right. Like they've got the right idea in that they're tapping into something that's freaking quite a large section of society out.
Yeah.
And trying to make a techno horror out of that, but they go too far. And so they end up making it so ridiculous it's never going to age very well.
No.
And a lot of films that portray emerging technology do date horribly, which is why it is worth hanging back and waiting to see what happens with the technology. Even more recent films that have done like the social media horror films where it all takes place on Facebook and stuff, like they've definitely held back until Facebook is a thing.
Yeah.
Like imagine if someone had done a film set on MySpace, like when MySpace was popular, it would look
Bebo.
It would look ridiculous now, wouldn't it? Or Napster or something. It's like people are way too quick to jump on a new technology and think, this is a great film. What if this thing terrified everyone? And it just doesn't date. And this film is, I think, it's even more dated than The Lawnmower Man, just certainly in the cast and what they were wearing, certainly the jargon. You've never heard anyone use these sorts of words out loud. Just doesn't exist. The mainframe, hacking, get off my network. Like, these things just don't happen. Like, this is a very fictionalized sci-fi world. But yeah, I like Johnny Mnemonic for its nonsensicalness. It is quite fast-paced and action-heavy, and like I say, it is a good cast. Even including the terrible Keanu Reeves. Johnny Mnemonic, another ill-judged techno sort of sci-fi horror. If you had to upload one of these movies into your brain, all 8 gig of your space in your brain, and just have it live in your head forever, and you could watch it whenever you wanted, would you choose to upload The Lawnmower Man into your brain or Johnny Mnemonic?
This is a tough one. What film would I want to have to live with in my brain?
Yeah.
I'd take The Lawnmower Man. Why? I don't know why. I just think just got on with the story slightly more, even though they're both ridiculous. Quite like the rapid change of character of Job from the dorky, taken advantage of guy to the super over intelligent.
There was almost a narrative.
Yeah,
there was a real attempt at a narrative.
Yeah, even though it had pacing issues, I felt overall I followed it.
I am going to disagree. Ooh. Now, I think perhaps this would have been more fair if we'd have watched the theatrical cuts of both these films, because The Lawnmower Man goes on for 2 hours and 20 minutes. Purely in comparing the extended cuts of these films, I would have to prefer Johnny Mnemonic. The Lawnmower Man, it does have more of a a semblance of a plot and a narrative, and almost some vague ambition there, but it's just so drawn out and extended. Really, I find it repeats itself just constantly. We're in the basement, we're in the compound, whereas Johnny Mnemonic is fast paced, it's action packed. It held my interest a lot more because, like, we're in Tokyo, we're in Beijing, we're in Newark, and then so many different characters as well, constantly rotating. Like, you've got Dolph Lundgren and he's Jesus, and Ice-T is an anarchist, Henry Rollins is like a doctor. I liked a lot of the wackiness and the variety of Johnny Mnemonic. But Johnny Mnemonic, for me, the better bad film, purely because it went 100 miles an hour the whole way. The film I would recommend most based on the kind of concept of these films is a David Cronenberg film from 1999 called Existenz. It's one of his more underrated. What that film did is hung back a little bit and waited to see how this whole video game thing was going to pan out and if it was going to take off. So by 1999, it very much had taken off. And we realised that we weren't going to be plugged into VR, like Job said. By 2001, we were actually going to be playing games, maybe even online all at the same time. So Existenz is about a couple of people who are addicted to a game called Existenz, and they plug into the game, and then we go into that world, and it's not silly CGI, it's just live action all the way through. So they play characters in like a mass multiplayer online game, and they can interact with each other, but if you die in Existenz, you can die in real life. And it's like they switch from world to world, and it's like sort of double agents and stuff like that. It's just really clever, really smart, and they waited till 1999 to really be more on the nose with video games and what makes video games kind of interesting, and role-playing games and stuff like that. So I think that's one of David Cronenberg's better films, and I would recommend that because that nails the idea of virtual reality and video games being this kind of tech horror, If you want bad films based on similar concepts to this, I mean, constantly throughout Johnny Mnemonic, I was reminded of Demolition Man. Fantastic bad film. Congo, I was reminded of quite a bit for some reason. Maybe the Lawnmower Man and the Chimp maybe put me in mind of Congo, but Congo is about a gorilla who is fitted with apparatus so that it can talk through a voice box. Nothing else about that film really relates to it, but if you want intelligent apes, and I'm assuming people are aware of the Planet of the Apes films, which are obviously great. And I was also put in mind of Hackers as well.
Yes, that's probably the one thing that...
Yeah, if you want a similarly dated film, Hackers also came out in the mid-90s and had lots of people probably also talking about plugging into the mainframe and going on people's networks.
All of that jargon.
Lots of jargon, lots of like techno and drum and bass and stuff like that, so that's similarly cheesy kind of techno. So if you have enjoyed the show today, you can obviously subscribe. We do release 2 episodes every month, and if you're subscribed, you'll be the first to know about it. If you could leave us a 5-star review on iTunes, we would really appreciate that as well. We are currently 5-star rated, and if you can help us to keep that going, that would be awesome. You can get in touch on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter at Schlock Tactics, and let us know what you thought of these films. If you have any films for us that you'd like us to review, or just to get in touch and let us know what you think, please do that. But that has been another episode of Schlock Tactics. My name is Ben Ash, and I've been joined by Mark.
Thank you for listening,
and we'll see you again next time. Bye.
Bye.